Hi, my name is Keegan Gallagher, and this is my third vlog of my computer science C++ journey. I am learning how to code in C++ using EDUB, OpenEDG, uh, so that I can start off with a harder language because I feel like if I start with C++, which is really hard to learn, JavaScript and Linux and not Linux, JavaScript and other coding languages will come really easily to me because if I can do the hardest one, then I can do the other ones. And I also have some experience with C Sharp, so I the whole object-based programming I already have that in the back of my mind, so a lot of the stuff already makes sense to me. Um, so from the last vlog, I have gotten to most likely here where I learned about conjunctions and disjunctions, which is where you can actually add it basically. So when I'm executing a loop, it will um when I'm executing a loop, it needs a certain thing to make it stop, so I can make certain conditions for it, and if I use the and or, I can make conditions that say two things need to be met or only one thing needs to be met. And so with a loop, like for example, it is only going to keep going if it's true, and true means 1. So the program will say that it's 1 if the certain requirement is reached. But if it's not, it'll go to 0, and that'll make it false. So basically, what I have is an and, which I can add to something. So if one of them is true and the other one is not, it will not execute the program. But if I use these two lines, it'll say or, which has a lower priority than and. It can say only one task has to be true to fulfill. And I can do certain things like the exclamation point, which turns a true to a false or a false to a true. Basically, if I have something that is supposed to be true, I can just put that in and it'll make it false. It'll just make it the opposite of what it is. So a 1 will go to a 0 and a 0 will go to 1. I can also do this with smaller numbers that are just one bit unary operators, but these have a couple different ones. You just use the one and sign as a conjunction, the one line as a disjunction, or I can negate it by saying it only requires 1 to provide 1 as a result. So it could be a 1 and a 0 and it'll equal 1, but if it's a 1 and a 1, it'll make it 0. I'm sorry. Let me restart with that. It requires only 1, so it needs to be 1, but if there's two ones, then it's gonna make it a 0. So if I have a 1 and a 1, that's gonna equal a 0, but if I have a 1 and a 0, it equals a 0. And then if I have a 0 and a 0, it still equals a 0, because I still need that single 1. And this isn't, this basically is the exclamation point. It just swaps them basically. I also learned how to expand integers to long, short, and I can also add this to character. So, but no floats, because I can't use that on all of these. These will not work with a float. So, integers only. 2 is the base for binary numbers because it works in a binary system. And when I'm shifting something to the left or the right, it's equal to 2, like how when you're multiplying by 10. So let's say you multiply 12 by 10, it's gonna equal 120. And so what basically happens is this 12 moves over, and so this 0 also moves over, and it goes over the point 0, so it moves over 1 this way if it equals to 10. So in binary, because the only things it can be is a 0 or a 1, there's only 2. So basically there's 2 possibilities for each of them. So if I have a 0, 0, 1, 0, and I multiply it by 2, it's going to equal a 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. Does that make sense? And it's also the opposite, where if you divide it by 2, it'll go 1 back. So you have to do a little bit of math. So if I were to multiply it by 4, it would go up all the way to here, because that's 2 2's. So it would go up 1, 2, and then another 1, 2. This can be seen here, where if I have this negative 8, and I divide it by 2, it'll make it a negative 4, which means it'll go back twice, because the 2 is, it means it goes back to whole places, but also does that twice. And when there's a negative, it just completely, it doesn't matter the negatives because of how how it works. So binary does not recognize negatives, so it's just the same as a positive. I've also been learning about box switches, and this is basically how I can make a block of code that will basically have a bunch of different ways of executing it, and I don't have to write out every single possibility. I can just quickly put in a case. So basically, if the the number that's put in equals 1, it'll do case X. If the number I put in is 2, it'll do case Y, and so on and so forth. And so that's a really easy way without having to just keep making the block again. And then I can also add a default one at the after that. Because if I put it to default, that'll just be what happens if none of the requirements are met, because otherwise it's just going to completely ignore everything in the box. Like, it would, if there was an if before all of this stuff, it would just completely ignore it unless there was a default option at the bottom. You have to do break after cases, because otherwise it's going to do everything that's right after it, because the way a computer will read it is it's going to read left to right, up to down. So unless you say break, it's just going to read every possibility after that one and then do those as well. So if you say break, it's going to get out of the box and just start doing what else it was trying to do. Also, in my last session, I just started vectors, which is still a big mystery to me, but from what I understand is I can say, without having to declare multiple variables, I can just store them all in one vector. So I can, if I have a vector 5, it can store up to 5 different variables, but 0 is included, so it doesn't go up to 5, it goes up to 4. Or I can make the vector empty, and then whatever is added to it, it will just immediately understand that that means it's a 5, because that's how many there are. If I were to say put 5 here and I put a 5 after this, it would make it, it wouldn't work at all and it would give you an error. But if it said vector 5 and I put 1 0 1 2 3, it's missing 1, so it'll make the fourth vector equal to 0, because it still understands that there's supposed to be 5, but it doesn't see 5. And with this, I can add it so that I can even have two-dimensional, just like on a graph, where I can make a vector 5 and then have a vector 4. So it's 5, 4. So this is on the x-axis and this is on the y-axis. So this is very new to me, and I still really don't understand it, so I'm going to try to do a lot more studying and note-taking on vectors, because it really is, it's still a strange concept to me, but this other stuff looks like a lot of it looks like a lot of alphabet soup, but there is some decent information in here. The way the course works is that it basically explains to me a lot of stuff, and it doesn't let me try it all out usually, so I'm kind of just taking notes throughout the whole thing of just random things that I think will be helpful. I hope to have some sort of interesting project in my next vlog, because I'd like to work on something to make out of C++ instead of just doing a course to get certified. I will still do the certification course, because I do want to get the certification. I was just thinking for the next week I would spend doing something along the lines of a actual project, because I am a hands-on learner, and if I'm working on the project, I feel like I'll learn more than just reading. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching this. I know that it's not the highest quality or very interesting for that matter, but I really appreciate you the time you spent watching it. Thank you.